going after her wonderful half-sister, Samantha.
And suddenly you just have my mom, who's classy and quiet and there, and then you have the other side of my family that is just...
It started like a whisper, quiet, forgettable, dismissed as noise. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, had weathered plenty of headlines. But this one? Just a lawsuit from a half-sister no one really believed could win. Samantha Markle had been brushed aside by the media, written off as bitter, irrelevant, and easily ignored. But what no one saw coming was the storm she was quietly preparing behind the scenes. Now, that whisper has exploded into a full-blown legal earthquake. And at the center of it all, not just sibling rivalry, but a courtroom war threatening to dismantle everything Meghan has built. Her carefully crafted public image, her Netflix empire, her standing in Hollywood, even her royal ties. Because Samantha didn't just come back swinging, she came back with receipts, a strategy, and a legal team that knows exactly where to strike. And according to insiders, Meghan's camp is scrambling. Panic has set in, not just because of what's being said, but because of what might still be uncovered. This isn't just about family drama anymore. It's about intent, manipulation, and the possibility that one woman's truth might actually have been a scripted takedown with international consequences. And what happens next could change everything. Let's start with the comeback that no one believed was possible. When Samantha Markle first filed her defamation lawsuit, it barely made a dent. The headlines were fleeting, the public interest mild, and Meghan's legal team easily brushed it off. A judge dismissed the case, ruling that Meghan's statements were simply opinions, not factual assertions that could be challenged in court. And just like that, it looked like the story was over before it even began. But Samantha wasn't finished. Behind the scenes, her legal team was treating that dismissal like a blueprint. Instead of defeat, they saw opportunity, a roadmap of where they misstepped, what didn't work, and more importantly, what would. That first ruling gave them something priceless, a second chance, this time with the knowledge to hit much, much harder. And they did. The new appeal didn't recycle old arguments. It pivoted, sharply. This time, the focus wasn't just on what Meghan said in interviews or documentaries. It was why she said it. The lawsuit shifted from surface-level drama to something far more sinister. Intent. Samantha's lawyers now argue that Meghan didn't simply share her version of events. She engineered it, fully aware that her words would damage her half-sister's life and reputation. That shift changes the entire legal landscape. Suddenly, this isn't a case of hurt feelings or blurred memories. It's a calculated attack. And in the courtroom, that's a dangerous line to cross. Instead of defending her words as emotional responses or innocent reflections, Meghan now faces a far more damning accusation: that she knowingly used her global platform to destroy someone she knew couldn't fight back. And Samantha's team claims they have the receipts to prove it. But that was only the beginning. This is where the case takes a dark, calculated turn. It's no longer about whether Meghan Markle's words were offensive, exaggerated, or emotionally charged. It's about whether they were deliberate weapons, sharpened behind the scenes, and aimed straight at her half-sister's credibility. Samantha Markle's legal team isn't pulling punches anymore. They've zeroed in on a single devastating argument. Meghan didn't just tell her story. She engineered a narrative with full awareness of the collateral damage. This is no longer about freedom of speech. It's about malicious intent. And if the court agrees, everything Meghan once claimed as her truth could crumble under the weight of her own strategy. At the heart of the new filing is a claim that's sending shivers through Meghan's inner circle: private communications. Samantha's attorneys allege they've uncovered emails, text messages, and possibly even audio recordings that show Meghan's team anticipated blowback and welcomed it. These aren't vague accusations. According to insiders, the evidence includes specific conversations outlining how to frame Samantha, how to control public perception, and how to make sure Meghan came out looking like the misunderstood hero. One source claims Meghan's PR advisors predicted Samantha would lash out once the Oprah interview aired. And rather than avoid that outcome, they leaned into it, preparing rebuttals, orchestrating spin, and securing sympathetic media outlets in advance. Another chilling detail? Alleged internal memos suggesting that any backlash from family members could actually benefit Meghan's image, making her look more isolated, more victimized, and more relatable to global audiences. Think about that. The pain of a family member wasn't a risk. It was part of the plan. And this theory gains even more power when you remember what Meghan said in that Oprah interview. She claimed she barely knew Samantha. "I don't know her birthday. I don't know her middle name. We were never close." But Samantha's team is fighting back, claiming that not only were those statements false, but they were delivered with the explicit goal of making Samantha look like a liar and an opportunist. This isn't just courtroom nitpicking. If the court accepts the idea that Meghan knew her sister personally, knew the damage she could cause, and chose to go there anyway, then the question becomes one of premeditation. And legally, that is everything. Suddenly, Meghan isn't just defending the words she said on Oprah or in her Netflix series. She's defending the decisions that led up to those moments, the phone calls, the strategy sessions, the editorial decisions. Samantha's team is digging into all of it, not just to prove malice, but to show coordination, timing, and most importantly, purpose. It's a brutal reframing of the entire Sussex media machine. What was once sold as vulnerability and authenticity is now being dissected as a carefully crafted PR offensive, one that targeted real people with no platform to fight back. And that narrative only gets more dangerous when you factor in what came next. If Oprah was the spark, Netflix was the wildfire. Samantha Markle's legal team isn't just focused on one explosive interview, they're pointing to a much larger, far more damaging machine. The 6-part Netflix documentary, Harry and Meghan. What Meghan said to Oprah might have been spontaneous, emotional, even unfiltered. But what she said in that $100 million Netflix production, that was polished, planned, and produced over months. And that's exactly why Samantha's lawyers are calling it a second wave of defamation. Not just a repeat, but a deliberate escalation. Unlike a live interview, the Netflix series wasn't off the cuff. It involved writers, editors, legal consultants, and PR handlers. A full-scale production team that had time to fact-check, to reconsider, to choose every word and frame with care. And yet, according to the lawsuit, the same damaging narrative about Samantha was not only repeated, it was expanded. The documentary portrayed Samantha as an outsider, a bitter half-sibling trying to profit off Meghan's fame. Viewers saw photos, headlines, sound bites, all wrapped in emotional music, slow-motion clips, and Meghan's signature look of heartbreak. But what Samantha's legal team sees is something much colder. Intentional character assassination, disguised as documentary storytelling. And the scale, it's massive. Harry and Meghan weren't just watched. It exploded across the globe, released in dozens of languages, and streamed into over 200 million households. This wasn't a scandal tucked inside a morning show. It was an international media event, Netflix's biggest documentary launch of the year, with Samantha's reputation caught in the crossfire. That level of exposure is now being weaponized in court. Samantha's team is using viewership data, search trends, and even sentiment analysis to argue that the damage wasn't just personal. It was global, measurable, and irreversible. They're showing a direct correlation between the documentary's release and the tsunami of harassment, threats, and reputation destruction Samantha endured. But that's not all. The legal team is also highlighting the budget and resources behind the documentary as part of their argument. This wasn't Meghan speaking off the cuff in a vulnerable moment. This was a multi-million-dollar media project crafted with the help of image consultants, narrative experts, and corporate strategists. And the key point, they had every opportunity to correct falsehoods, but didn't. Why? According to Samantha's side, the damage was part of the design. By casting Samantha as the unstable antagonist, Meghan's narrative became stronger. The emotional arc was more compelling. The victimhood is deeper. And for an audience hungry for authenticity, that version of the truth sold, even if it left real people in its wake. Legal analysts say this is where Meghan's defense begins to crack. In court, the difference between opinion and defamation often rests on intent and repetition. Saying something once might be forgivable. Saying it again, on the largest streaming platform in the world, knowing the fallout, that's a whole different story, especially when the fallout wasn't just theoretical. Samantha says she endured months of online abuse, death threats, and media harassment after the documentary aired, much of it quoting or referencing scenes directly from the series. And Meghan's team can't claim surprise. According to Samantha's lawyers, they were warned about this exact outcome and chose to move forward anyway. That makes it more than storytelling. That makes it a strategy. But the real danger? Netflix may have just been the beginning, because what followed wasn't just backlash. It was something far more personal and far more dangerous. What followed the Netflix premiere wasn't a wave, it was an avalanche. Samantha Markle's legal team says the moment the series dropped, her life was turned upside down. Not by tabloids, not by random critics, but by an organized, unrelenting storm of threats, stalking, doxing, and harassment, all directly tied to Meghan's rise as a global truth teller. And the most chilling part? The timeline. Samantha's lawyers have traced the worst spikes in abuse back to specific scenes and quotes from Meghan's documentary and interviews. We're not talking about a few nasty comments online. We're talking hundreds of death threats, all arriving within days of Meghan's public appearances. Law enforcement reportedly had to get involved. Digital forensics teams were called in, and social media platforms were flooded with posts smearing Samantha's name, questioning her mental health, and mocking her disability. According to court filings, some even went so far as to post her home address and private medical details. A terrifying escalation for someone who had no security team no PR backup, and no platform of her own. Samantha's attorneys are calling it influencer harassment, a modern legal theory that says celebrities don't have to directly tell fans to attack. Their platform alone does the work. Their reach becomes the weapon. And their carefully curated narratives act as a trigger. In Samantha's case, the argument is hauntingly simple. Meghan Markle knew what would happen. She had seen it before. She had experienced the power of viral outrage. And instead of pulling back, she pressed forward, with full knowledge that Samantha had neither the resources nor the visibility to defend herself. But it wasn't just about online attacks. The harassment took root in real life. Samantha claims she was followed, harassed at her home, and bombarded with threatening phone calls. In one instance, strangers reportedly showed up outside her property, filming, shouting slurs, and daring her to say something now. According to sworn affidavits, she was forced to change addresses multiple times, hire private security on her own dime, and even seek therapy for trauma-related anxiety and PTSD. But what truly bolsters the case is the forensic mapping done by her legal team. They've reportedly compiled a detailed digital timeline showing precisely when each wave of abuse began, and how those dates match up with Meghan's most high-profile appearances. The Oprah interview, the Netflix rollout, the press tour. That level of correlation is rare and deadly in court, because the issue here isn't just that harm occurred. It's when, how, and why it happened. The timestamps alone suggest a pattern too precise to ignore. The attack wasn't random. It followed a media schedule, and Samantha's lawyers plan to use that pattern to prove causation, the holy grail in defamation law. If they can show Meghan's public storytelling triggered real-world consequences, and that those consequences were predictable, they could dismantle her defense piece by piece. It also shatters the image Meghan spent years building, the graceful, misunderstood Duchess, abused by the press and hounded by haters. Because in this new courtroom narrative, she's not the victim. She's the instigator, a public figure with a megaphone so loud that it shattered the life of someone already struggling to be heard. And this is where the case turns from defamation to something even deeper, psychological damage. Samantha isn't just suing for reputation. She's suing for what she says was a complete emotional breakdown, triggered by what Meghan said, and when she said it. And the receipts for that, they're even harder to ignore. If Meghan Markle's legal team wasn't panicking before, they are now, because the case has moved into the most dangerous phase of all, discovery. The stage where secrets are no longer safe, and the truth has nowhere to hide. Samantha Markle's attorneys aren't just making noise in the courtroom. They're coming with subpoenas, document requests, and forensic experts, ready to peel back the layers of Meghan's public image. According to insiders, the goal isn't just to win the case, it's to expose the entire media apparatus behind Meghan's story. And that starts with communications. Sources close to the legal proceedings say Samantha's team is aggressively targeting emails, text messages, internal Slack logs, production notes, and call transcripts from Meghan's PR firm, Netflix producers, and even Oprah's staff. They want it all. Messages sent before the interviews, during production, and after the public fallout. Because if they can show that Meghan and her team discussed Samantha in advance, planned her portrayal, and coordinated how to frame her on screen, that's not free speech anymore. That's calculated defamation. Even more chilling, insiders claim some of those documents have already surfaced. According to leaked court whispers, the phrase control fallout appears multiple times in Meghan's correspondence with media partners. Another email allegedly discusses how to steer the narrative regarding her family, specifically instructing producers to emphasize Meghan's distance from her half-sister. And one internal doc reportedly uses the phrase strategic emotional distance from Samantha, language that sounds less like family tension and more like a boardroom plan. If even a fraction of these materials makes it into evidence, Meghan's defense collapses. Because now the question isn't whether her words were harmful, it's whether they were carefully rehearsed, signed off by professionals, and broadcast with full knowledge of the consequences. And it gets worse. Discovery doesn't stop at Meghan's circle. If the court grants access, it could spread, pulling in Netflix executives, royal family advisors, and media consultants who were in the room when these stories were shaped. Subpoenas could target group chats, meeting minutes, even personal diaries or notes. Suddenly, the truth Meghan shared so confidently could be dissected by a legal microscope, with every exaggeration, omission, and spin laid bare. There are even whispers that production timelines from Harry and Meghan will be used to show how long they had to review footage, consider legal risks, and adjust the message. And if it turns out they kept the most damaging segments in the final cut, knowing full well they would ignite public fury, that alone could establish malicious intent. And then there's the bomb no one saw coming: psychological records. Samantha's legal team claims to have clinical documentation tying her emotional collapse directly to Meghan's public statements. We're talking therapy transcripts, psychiatric evaluations, and prescription records, all submitted under seal. but allegedly forming a devastating picture of real, long-term damage. The argument? That Meghan's words didn't just tarnish a reputation, they triggered a mental health crisis so severe, Samantha had to alter the course of her entire life. If the court buys that link, and the digital paper trail backs it up, this won't be just a lawsuit, it'll be a landmark. One that sends a clear message to every public figure. If your story causes predictable destruction, you don't get to hide behind the excuse of my truth. And as Samantha's lawyers press for every last document, Meghan's inner circle reportedly fears one thing more than all else: the uncontrolled spillover. Because if these communications exist, and if they name other people, especially those within the palace or Hollywood elite, then this case could drag a whole network of players into the spotlight. And once those floodgates open, there's no shutting them. But that's not the only nightmare Meghan's team is facing. Because while the court prepares to examine her paper trail, the public is watching something else collapse entirely. Meghan Markle didn't just build a public image, she built an entire brand empire, polished to perfection. From humanitarian causes to Netflix deals, children's books to lifestyle blogs, the Duchess of Sussex curated every move to present herself as the ultimate modern icon. Brave, wronged, elegant, and above all, authentic. But in the shadow of Samantha Markle's lawsuit, that image is beginning to crack wide open. Hollywood insiders are now whispering what many feared. Meghan's star is no longer shining the way it used to. According to industry reports, meetings are being canceled, contract renewals are being paused, and streaming platforms that once courted her are now quietly stepping back. One executive allegedly referred to her as a PR risk in heels. Another called the lawsuit a reputation time bomb. Why? Because of one clause buried in nearly every major celebrity contract: the morality clause. It's a legal safety net that allows studios, brands, and production houses to cut ties with talent who become too controversial, whether proven guilty or not. And the language is vague by design. All it takes is public backlash, reputational harm, or disruption to business for the plug to be pulled. If Meghan is found liable for defamation, or even just dragged deep into discovery with damning headlines, her partners don't need to wait for a verdict. They can walk away overnight, and some already have. Sources inside Los Angeles agencies claim Meghan has been dropped from at least one media consulting firm. Another PR agency reportedly ghosted the Sussex camp after the Netflix backlash intensified. Meanwhile, a quiet exodus of brand partners, those behind-the-scenes sponsors who bankroll lifestyle ventures, has begun pulling out, citing reputational concerns. But it's not just the entertainment world that's watching. The court of public opinion, once enchanted by Meghan's fairy tale escape from the monarchy, is starting to turn. On social media, hashtags that once rallied behind her are now filled with questions, doubts, and in some cases, rage. Her once loyal base is beginning to fracture, with many questioning the sincerity of her message. Was she ever telling the truth? How much of the victimhood was strategic? Who else did she silence? Even media outlets that once treated Meghan with white glove coverage are shifting tone. Headlines have gone from "Meghan speaks her truth" to "Meghan faces defamation bombshell." Late-night hosts are making jokes, journalists are digging deeper, and the internet, where narratives move at lightning speed, is already rewriting hers. Because if the courts confirm that Meghan used her fame to deliberately target and damage her half-sister, then the entire foundation of the Sussex brand collapses. The books, the speeches, the awards, the podcast interviews, they all become evidence of manipulation, not empowerment. And Samantha's team knows it. They're not just suing for personal justice, they're going for the kill. According to one legal strategist close to the case, the goal isn't just to win damages, it's to shut down the Meghan Markle media machine completely. To prove that the Duchess who claimed to be silenced actually weaponized her voice, and that the empire she built was paid for in the reputations of others. This is why the lawsuit is more than a sibling dispute. It's a direct strike at the Sussex brand itself, one that could cost Meghan everything she's built post-royalty. And the ripple effect could spread far beyond Hollywood. Because the next chapter doesn't just threaten Meghan's career, it threatens the one thing that no PR spin can fix. This isn't just a legal case. It's a ticking time bomb that could detonate inside Buckingham Palace. What began as a bitter defamation lawsuit between estranged half-sisters has now spiraled into a constitutional headache for the British royal family. Because with the court granting discovery and Samantha Markle's legal team going for total exposure, the ripples of this courtroom war are now crashing directly against the walls of the monarchy itself. And the firm is feeling it. Sources close to royal advisors say there is genuine concern inside palace walls, not because the royal family is directly involved in the lawsuit, but because they might soon be dragged into it. Meghan's defamation defense hinges, in part, on the circumstances and context under which she gave her now infamous interviews, including her sit-down with Oprah and the Netflix docuseries. And that's exactly where things get dangerously complicated. Because during the very period Meghan was preparing to speak her truth, she was still in contact with royal officials, PR staff, and possibly even members of the family. Discovery could unearth emails, WhatsApp messages, meeting notes, or call logs linking Meghan's version of events to discussions held with the palace. If that happens, it could turn a civil lawsuit into a full-blown royal scandal. Here's the nightmare scenario. Meghan's team, attempting to justify her comments, might claim she was advised, or at least passively permitted, by palace aides to say certain things. Or worse, that the palace deliberately withheld support, forcing her to shape her own narrative. That argument, if backed by documentation, would drag Buckingham Palace into the case as a silent accomplice, not a neutral bystander. And if Samantha's legal team uncovers proof that any royal advisor knew the Netflix series contained potentially defamatory content and failed to intervene, that's not just optics, it's legal exposure. Suddenly, we're talking about tacit endorsement, about a monarchy that may have quietly watched as Meghan destroyed her sister's reputation on a global stage. According to insider reports, the palace's legal advisors are already conducting an internal audit, reviewing old communications, staff notes, and briefing records from the Megxit era to assess their risk. Because Discovery doesn't care about titles, it doesn't stop at the Duchess. If royal press secretaries, assistants, or family members are found in Meghan's messaging threads, or worse, giving commentary, they can be subpoenaed, they can be questioned, they can be exposed. This also opens the door to a politically radioactive scenario, that members of the royal family were not just aware of Meghan's media strategy, but complicit in it, perhaps even encouraging it behind closed doors. Imagine the headlines. Palace insiders helped shape Netflix attack on Markle family. Whether that's true or not, even the possibility of it being debated in court is a PR catastrophe the monarchy cannot afford. And yet, the damage doesn't stop with the crown. The Sussex's Netflix series contains implications that stretch into politics, race, immigration, mental health, and international media. It was framed as a mission for justice, truth, and change. But now, that noble narrative is being questioned. If evidence shows Meghan weaponized storytelling and possibly leaned on royal silence to shield her while she did it, then it's not just the monarchy that suffers, it's Meghan's entire movement. Suddenly, the people who endorsed her, promoted her, and invited her to headline conferences and podcasts, they're now second-guessing. Corporations with public-facing reputations are reportedly reevaluating their alliances, especially as Samantha's legal filings hint at more revelations to come. One Hollywood insider bluntly told a tabloid, "If even one royal email surfaces, the whole thing explodes." And let's not forget the internal Sussex risk. Because if Meghan's legal defense strategy leans on suggesting that she was acting under institutional pressure, it could put her in direct conflict with Prince Harry's public stance, that the royal family had abandoned them. If behind-the-scenes documents show otherwise, that aides were involved or at least informed, then Harry's narrative gets torpedoed too. And any future deals, memoirs, documentaries, or podcasts about their escape from the firm, instantly compromised. The collateral damage isn't just personal, it's monarchical, commercial, and generational. Because once Discovery drags the royal family into a US courtroom narrative, even if just by name, it shatters the long-held policy of never complain, never explain. Suddenly, the monarchy is forced to explain, to justify, to react. And when that wall breaks, anything is possible. But as the palace braces for legal blowback, Meghan's lawyers are facing another growing threat. One that doesn't come from institutions or politics, but from the courtroom's most unforgiving tool, expert analysis of truth versus performance. At the heart of Meghan Markle's rise to global stardom is one powerful, carefully curated tool: her voice. Whether in her Oprah interview, her Netflix documentary, or her Spotify podcast, Meghan's ability to control a narrative, deliver a polished message, and radiate vulnerability has defined her brand. But in the courtroom, that same ability is now under brutal forensic scrutiny. And what once looked like authenticity may soon be recast as performance. Samantha Markle's legal team isn't just challenging what Meghan said, they're challenging how she said it. And to do it, they've brought in experts, psychologists, media analysts, and communication specialists to dissect Meghan's public appearances, frame by frame, line by line. Their job? To determine whether her emotional delivery was spontaneous and sincere, or scripted, rehearsed, and weaponized. It's a chilling pivot in the lawsuit. Legal filings reportedly reference coached delivery, dramatic pacing, and strategic language, suggesting that Meghan's on-camera moments weren't off-the-cuff recollections. They were rehearsed lines designed to evoke sympathy while isolating her enemies. In this case, her own family. And the key figure at the center of that strategy? Samantha Markle. What Meghan described as distant, almost non-existent sibling ties. "I don't know her birthday. I barely knew her," is now being presented by Samantha's legal team as a carefully selected soundbite, intended not to express detachment, but to delegitimize Samantha as a person altogether. And according to the communication experts now reviewing the footage, this wasn't accidental. It was emotional engineering. Imagine the courtroom showing split screens, Meghan's Netflix voiceovers paired with internal communications, emails to producers, texts to PR advisors, memos with key phrases like build separation from Samantha, amplify emotional isolation, and control fallout. If those documents exist, and the forensic experts can tie them to her public statements, the case explodes. Because the legal distinction is razor sharp. If Meghan's comments are seen as emotional reflections, they're protected speech. But if they're proven to be calculated attacks masked as emotional truth, they fall under defamation with malice, the most dangerous kind. Suddenly, my truth becomes a lawsuit-worthy lie with impact. And impact is where the court is laser-focused. According to leaked court filings, Samantha's lawyers have submitted a clinical timeline showing that after Meghan's interviews aired, Samantha experienced severe psychological distress, diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, and depressive episodes, all tracked by licensed therapists and linked directly to the dates of Meghan's most high-profile media moments. That's when the storytelling stops being entertainment. That's when it becomes a liability. And the forensic experts agree. One body language analyst reportedly noted that Meghan's demeanor during certain interviews shifted dramatically when discussing her family. When speaking about Harry or Archie, the expert explained, her tone softens, her posture relaxes. But when she mentions Samantha, there's a subtle tightening of the jaw, a pause before delivering key lines, textbook signs of pre-rehearsed messaging. That expert is now preparing to testify under oath. But the damage doesn't rest on physical cues alone. Samantha's team is also submitting metadata from public video files, timestamps of retakes, scene changes, editing choices, to prove that Meghan and her producers had multiple opportunities to remove or alter defamatory content before final release. They didn't. That signals intent. And in defamation law, intent is the thin line between protected expression and punishable harm. Legal observers are now calling this a landmark case in the age of influencer litigation. Because if Meghan is found guilty of defamation, not for what she said, but how methodically she said it, it could rewrite the rules for celebrities, YouTubers, podcasters, and public figures everywhere. And that precedent wouldn't just hurt Meghan, it would rip through Hollywood, the influencer industry, and elite media brands that rely on truth-based storytelling to sell image and identity. Because if courts start holding performers accountable for harm caused by calculated storytelling, every emotional truth becomes a potential lawsuit. But Samantha's legal team isn't stopping at storytelling. They've hinted at a final layer of evidence, a trail of internal documents that could connect Meghan's media campaign directly to production teams, PR agencies, and Netflix executives. These aren't just notes. They include words like target positioning, victim-centric narrative, and worst of all, amplify emotional tension for audience retention. In other words, Samantha wasn't just a casualty. She may have been a plot device. And if that claim holds up in court, it won't matter how many tears were shed on screen. The Duchess of Sussex won't be judged by how compelling her story was, but by how deliberately it was designed to destroy someone else's. But even that might not be the final blow. Because while experts dig into Meghan's language and body, Samantha's legal team has already laid the foundation for what comes next. When the first domino falls, it never stops with one. That's what Meghan Markle's legal team now fears most. Not the court ruling, not the headlines, not even the expert testimony that's tearing apart her public image. It's what happens after. Because if Samantha Markle's lawsuit succeeds, if a judge agrees that Meghan weaponized storytelling, defamed her sister with intent, and caused real psychological harm, the verdict won't just end in financial damages. It will open the floodgates. Legal analysts are already warning of a chain reaction, a domino effect that could trigger a swarm of lawsuits from others who feel they were cast as villains in Meghan's carefully curated narrative. Family members, estranged friends, former co-workers, anyone name-dropped in the Oprah interview, the Netflix series, or her podcasts could suddenly see opportunity. And if Samantha wins, they'll have a precedent in hand, a map, a model for taking Meghan to court and winning. The most obvious risk? Thomas Markle, Meghan's father. He's been painted for years as the absentee parent, the emotional manipulator, the man who betrayed Meghan before her royal wedding. But Thomas has consistently argued that his side of the story was never allowed to be told, that he was silenced while his daughter spun a global sob story at his expense. And now, if Samantha's case succeeds, he could follow with his own lawsuit, armed with years of media coverage, phone records, and published messages. And that's just the beginning. What about Meghan's former best friend, Nanaki Pretty, who gave interviews contradicting the Duchess's version of her upbringing? Or former co-stars from Suits, who were reportedly blindsided by Meghan's claims of isolation and exclusion in the entertainment industry? Or even royal insiders who may have been implied, if not directly named, as racist or complicit in her suffering, the legal exposure becomes limitless. Because Samantha's case isn't just about words, it's about intentional narrative construction. If it's proven that Meghan used her fame to knowingly distort other people's reputations for personal gain, then every chapter of her public life becomes fair game. Every quote, every scene, every speech. And it won't just be lawsuits knocking on her door. It'll be brands, sponsors, publishers, studios. Morality clauses, the nuclear weapon in celebrity contracts, can be triggered not just by criminal behavior, but by reputational damage. Meghan's deals with Netflix, Penguin Random House, and other partners likely include provisions allowing the companies to terminate the relationship if she becomes too controversial, too polarizing, or too legally entangled. And let's be clear, a defamation ruling in favor of Samantha Markle would be the ultimate red flag. Netflix may reconsider future content. Book publishers could yank upcoming titles. Lifestyle brands, once eager to collaborate, may quietly disappear. And all it takes is one domino, Samantha's case, to tip the rest into collapse. But the damage wouldn't stop with business. Meghan's advocacy work, the platform she built around feminism, racial justice, and mental health awareness, relies on public trust, on the belief that she is honest, vulnerable, and speaking from a place of integrity. But if the court finds that she fabricated key elements of her story or destroyed others in the process, that trust will evaporate. And with it, her ability to lead any movement beyond herself. Her image as a humanitarian becomes hollow. Her message of empowerment becomes suspect. And the cost isn't just external, it's personal. Insiders say the Sussexes are already under immense pressure. Harry, who has stood beside Meghan through every controversy, now finds himself in a legally precarious position. If Samantha's case drags him into discovery, through texts, communications, or production decisions, he may be forced to testify, to explain what he knew and when. And that could drive an even deeper wedge between the brothers, the firm, and the future of the monarchy. But even more devastating, the case threatens the one thing Harry and Meghan claim to value above all else, their children's legacy. Because what happens when Archie and Lilibet grow up and see their mother's image, not as a survivor, but as an architect of public destruction? What happens when Mom's Netflix show becomes the case study in law school for modern-day influencer defamation? That's not just reputational damage. That's legacy damage. Permanent, generational, irreversible. And this is exactly what Samantha Markle's team is aiming for. Not just a courtroom victory, not just financial compensation, but the dismantling of the Sussex brand itself. A final, decisive blow to the polished castle Meghan built out of PR, narrative, and emotional appeal. Brick by brick, image by image, soundbite by soundbite. And as the walls begin to shake, one question remains. Meghan Markle once declared she was silenced, that the palace, the press, and even her own family tried to erase her voice. So she fought back. On Oprah's couch, in Netflix's boardroom, on global stages that broadcast her truth to millions. But now, that same truth, the one that catapulted her into celebrity sainthood, is circling back with the force of a legal reckoning. Not because she spoke up, but because of how she spoke, and what followed. May no longer be protected by sympathy or storytelling. Samantha Markle's lawsuit has pulled back the curtain on something far more dangerous than royal gossip. It's exposed the machinery behind modern-day influence, the calculated way fame can be molded, sharpened, and weaponized against those without a platform to fight back. Meghan wasn't just telling her story, Samantha argues. She was orchestrating an image, and she knew exactly who would get trampled to build it. And the court isn't laughing this off. This case has moved past headlines and hashtag wars. It's now in the hands of judges, legal strategists, and forensic analysts. The stage Meghan once controlled with flattering lighting and emotional monologues has been replaced by court transcripts, subpoenas, and psychiatric evaluations. No camera crew, no director, no filter, just the facts and the fallout. If Samantha wins, the verdict won't just be read aloud in a Florida courtroom. It'll echo across Hollywood, the publishing world, the halls of Buckingham Palace, and the global media empire that once bent over backwards to platform the Sussexes. Meghan's carefully sculpted image, humanitarian, survivor, victim, will no longer be immune to scrutiny. It will become case evidence, a warning sign, and perhaps an ending. Because what started as a whisper, a sibling feud, a dismissed lawsuit, has erupted into a courtroom confrontation that may decide the future of the most powerful personal brand in modern royal history. Meghan Markle didn't just gamble on storytelling. She built an empire on it. But if that empire was built on spin, and that spin caused real, measurable harm, then the courts may decide that the storyteller herself is now the story. And in that story, the victim isn't the Duchess, it's the people she left in the wreckage. This is no longer just a legal case, it's the endgame of a narrative war. And for Meghan, the final chapter may already be writing itself.